Good evening, and welcome to the Resources Committee of Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council. My name's Councillor John Isett, and I'm the chairman of the committee. And I'd like to start by making a few welcomes. This is the first occasion for the Resources Committee. We're one of the new overview committees. There are 3 of those in the council, and it's our role to provide constructive challenge to achieve better outcomes for our residents, and it's important therefore that the committee works together in a collegiate way, and I'm sure we'll do that. So I'd like to start by welcoming newly elected councillors to the committee and returning councillors, and also to the portfolio holder who's going to speak to the substantive item tonight, Councillor Paul Harvey. So good to have you with us, Paul. And there's one main item on the agenda, but it's a big one in as much as it is the end of year report, if you like, on how the council has done in relation to its many objectives. There are 79 key performance indicators that we're going to be looking at tonight. So there's a lot to consider here, and we will need to move through it quickly. I'm going to now move on to the usual announcements. Firstly, on fire evacuation procedures, there are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, it's real, so please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the side of this room. Exit through reception and meet in the War Memorial Park. I'd like to welcome our viewers who are listening to us on and seeing us on webcast. The meeting is being webcast live on the internet and will be available to view on YouTube after the meeting. Please can I remind members and officers that in order to be heard clearly within the room by those present and on the webcast, that you must speak directly into your microphone. The microphone stem can be moved so that it is as close to your mouth as possible. Mobile phones, the usual thing, please switch them off or turn them to silent. So moving to the agenda, firstly, apologies for absence and substitutions. I think that I'm told that Councillor Jenkins has been held up and at work and will join the meeting shortly. Are there any other apologies for absence or substitutions?
Yes, Chair. I'm substituting for Councillor Andrew Johnson.
Thank you, Councillor Bound. It's good to have you here. Right. Next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Nope, we have no declarations of interest. Next item is urgent matters. I'm not aware of any urgent matters. Anyone got any urgent matters? So no urgent matters. Right, item 4 on the agenda is appointment of a vice chair for 24-25 municipal year. Firstly, are there any nominations? Councillor Carr?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate myself if possible.
Okay. Any other nominations?
Oh, sorry. I'd like to nominate Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So you're nominating Councillor Lee. Right. And any other nominations? Nope. Okay. So I think in that case we need to have a vote on that. And can we have a vote by show of hands. If we start with those who would like Councillor Carr to be the Vice Chairman, could you raise your hands? It's 2. Okay. And can I now have votes for Councillor Lee? I've 6 I've got there, right? Yeah. So I can say that Councillor Alex Lee is appointed as Vice Chairman. And Councillor Lee, do you want to stay there? Or?
Yeah, I'll stay here.
Okay. Right, okay. Yes, you're near enough. Good. Okay. Right, now we move on to the next item, which is the minutes of the predecessor committee to us, which was the scrutiny committee, and that they held a meeting on the 19th of March of this year. I need to move the minutes as a signed correct record. Given that I think only 2 of us currently on this committee were present at that meeting, I think that's Councillors Carr and Jones. Can you both or either one of you confirm that the minutes are a correct record? Good. Okay. I noticed that there was one sort of follow-up in the minutes about councillors being able to attend updates from registered housing providers. Can I just turn to Ellie here? Is there any update, or Katie, on that?
We have raised it with officers and we'll circulate an update after the meeting.
It's just a point I hope that everyone will agree with, that if we do make recommendations, it's useful to track the response we get from those. And so I think in terms of how the minutes are written in future, can we make sure that if there are recommendations that they figure separately and prominently, so that we can see whether our recommendations are being given due consideration. I'm sure there will be. Okay, right. Now on to the main item of the committee meeting, and that is the 2023-24 Q4 Performance Indicator Review. So this is the, as I said earlier, the end of year report on all the key measures and projects that the council is involved in, and there are 79 measures, and there's also a separate report, which is a confidential report on giving an update on some of the key projects that the council is involved in. And for those at home, the report examines each of the 79 measures by reference to a RAG grading scale, with red equating to performance that is not up to target. Amber performance is currently substandard, and green, the target has been achieved. And of the 79 measures, the report is claiming that 51 meet the green standard, 8 are amber, and 8 are red, and 12, for reasons that will be given, it's not applicable. Now, what I'm proposing to do tonight with officers is to hear from the lead officer, Katie Salis, who's going to sort of run through the background, the methodology for the report. We've got, as Councillor Jones said at the outset, we've got the top team of officers, or many of the top team of officers here, who are going to speak to each of the areas that they're responsible, covering all these measures. And I think the best way of doing it is not in the running order as it appears on the report, but officer by officer. So we've got the 11 officers who are here tonight. I think it may even be 12 now, because we've got Sarah Good and Sarah Longthorpe who are going to both speak together. There is there's one point I think that needs to be addressed early on, which is the pink papers, the confidential papers. We would have to go into closed session to discuss those, and because there's confidential information there that it would not be appropriate for us to discuss in public. It would be helpful if councillors on the committee tonight could indicate whether they want to look into raise questions about items on the pink papers, and if there are any, which officer it would apply to, so that we can keep back those officers that are going to need to answer the questions and release those that are not going to. So could I have some indication of whether we want to go into confidential session? Councillor Lee.
Apologies, I am going to be the annoying one that keeps everyone here a little bit longer, but there are some items on there, and I think there's also a general question as to some of the mitigating actions that not necessarily applies to every officer, but it is just a general comment that I'd like to make. So I assume we would have to go into closed session for that as well.
Absolutely, and perhaps the general point you could make at the beginning, maybe. But yes, so okay. Any other councillors who would like to look at the confidential paper? Councillor Carr.
Depending on the conversation we have on the white papers, it's likely that I will have questions on May Place, potentially waste, delivery and menu down.
Okie dokie. Well, I hope that's helpful to officers. I think we could get cracking then. And the first person I'd like to invite to introduce the report is the leader of the council, Councillor Paul Harvey. If that's good for you, Paul, can I let you take the lead?
Thank you very much, Councillor Isaac. I'll keep my opening remarks brief, conscious that you want to get into the substance of the meeting. Just to say a huge thank you, I think, to start with, to Katie and the team for the manner in which the report is presented to you, because you can see the work that's gone into changing the way that the information is presented. It is an iterative process that's being undertaken, so we are still learning and developing this information presentation even further. But you can see how it's beginning to change over the years, and it is significantly different to new colleagues. This is different to the way it has been presented before. It's also different to do it in this format, because previously this piece of exercise was done through the performance panel that had a debate and had a conversation, and then it came back to the committee. And the committee had the same debate and the same conversation over the same points because they chose to. And that's an important manner of trying to be a bit more efficient in how we do this, and doing this in open session like this is perhaps a good way. But that's your choice. So, colleagues, in that sense, you need to decide that you're happy with the manner of this process and the manner of inquiry, because it's your constructive criticism that I'm here to listen to take that away and think through carefully with the colleagues. I want to thank the team that are here today, because you've got the big team. They're all here this evening to answer questions, and thank them for their time and input this evening. We do say quite openly, Chair, that we welcome the scrutiny and we welcome the conversation with you. We will not be able to answer all questions this evening, and you would not expect us to. But we will be able to take a lot away with us to think through and come back to you. So we hope we can have a balance of hopefully answering most, probably having some responses coming back to you, but nonetheless taking this as seriously as we need to. And again, just to take that as it said, I am here to listen. So I will be ensuring that we do hear what you've got to say as a cabinet. So I'm here to represent not myself in terms of being leader, but the cabinet and all the portfolios of the work that they're doing in this area too. And we will feed back to colleagues. So yeah, without holding you up any further, leave it for you to get into the substance.
Thank you very much, Paul. Right, if I can turn to Senior Officer Katie Salis to give some background to this process and the way that things are measured.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So our performance is reviewed quarterly, with certain measures that appear quarterly and others annually. And what we're doing is outlining our progress and any performance trends that we're seeing. So each year, the performance measure for the next municipal year are set, with the proposed measures being reviewed by what was Scrutiny Committee and a final decision being made by Cabinet. So the measures you are reviewing are the final set for the year 23-24, and this is every measure because it is that end of year roundup. And then this committee will review quarterly as we move forward into 25-26. I think it's important to note that the wording of measures can't be changed at this point in the process once they're adopted. The opportunity for this committee to question KPIs and contribute to them is when the 25-26 measures are going to be proposed further on in the municipal year. In terms of the papers you have before you this evening, as Councillor Harvey has said, our approach to this is evolving. What we've aimed to do is, rather than just present the RAG status, is to give you more context as to why we believe it's important that these items are measured, what units of measurements we use where that is relevant, and therefore hopefully that translates into the impact it has on residents of this borough. But also as we move forward, we will be providing benchmarking data against other organisations where that is available against the measures that we have, and that is certainly something that we have looked at in the 25-26 measures. Where can we get more contextual performance data to aid our review of our performance? You also note that we've got the private papers of the summary of major projects as of June 24. I would like to reassure you that that's the last time you'll see it in that format, which I realise is quite a lot of paperwork to read. In 24-25, we've highlighted key milestones for those projects, and they will come forward in this sort of format, which makes it easier to consume, but also ensures that you're aware of where progress is at on those. So what we are always trying to do is measure our achievement of the council plan, and that is what these measures feed into. So I hope you find that a useful summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Right, so I think, as I said earlier, we're going to do this officer by officer, and I'm going to invite Sarah Good and Sarah Longthorpe up to talk to us. I think the best way of dealing with this is if you would do it KPI by KPI, and so with each KPI we can ask any questions and make any recommendations at that point and then move on to the next KPI. Is everyone happy with that approach to it? Fine. Okay, Sarah and Sarah. So which one of you, are you both going to speak? No, Sarah Longthorpe. Okay, hi Sarah. So if you would take us through your KPIs one by one. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. May I just take this opportunity to introduce Sarah Good, who's joined the team as Head of Major Projects and Development. So normally as Head of Service, she would be here running through these KPIs, but it's a bit unfair to throw in the deep end, particularly when these relate to KPIs over the last year as well. So I'm here to provide that background and that overview, but I'm sure Sarah will contribute where necessary. So the first KPI is against the town centre programme. As you can see from the dashboard here, overall it's green. This obviously refers to sort of 23-24 actions, and I think it really relates to the town centre strategy, which was split into several areas, and the administration sort of cabinet very much chose to focus on sort of the top of town as the initial sort of phase. Obviously, behind the scenes to this town centre strategy, to add some context, there's been a lot of due diligence which informs a lot of the work that we've been doing. And that's due diligence around sort of the infrastructure generally, both transport and utility. Some additional sort of car parking surveys, as well as some extra sort of retail and market analysis, as the town centre strategy was quite sort of high level in those respects. There was also a proposed sort of malls, public realm and arts project, which was paused pending further consideration as sort of budgets on that were increasing, and the current administration really wanted to focus on the top of town as a priority area and look at what interventions and options could be applied specifically to that area that very much improve that public realm and improve sort of the pride in place and the quality of the place generally. So we are currently working through that at the moment. We've also been sort of testing the town centre strategy in terms of massings and sort of routes to deliver on some of the proposals in there behind the scenes. But sort of viability is challenging at this moment in time for sort of a variety of reasons, but we're still, that sort of forms very much part of the due diligence work that we're still undertaking. I don't have much more on this KPI, and I welcome questions.
Okay, any questions for the officers? Any comments? Councillor Carr.
Thank you. I think there are a number of things to welcome. The focus on public realm, pride place improvements are very much welcome. I think the concern I would have is the pace at which the town centre regeneration in sort of more physical terms is moving. I think there is a perception among residents at the moment that not a great deal is happening, hasn't happened since 2022. And I think what would be useful going forwards is a sort of reassurance about when we can start to see the next steps beyond the cosmetic into those sort of physical changes I think that we'd all like to see from that town centre strategy.
Okay, Sarah.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Carr. So I think there's been a lot of activity recently on short-term interventions around sort of deep cleansing, painting of railings, improvement of public realms, looking at rationalising some of the street furniture, and sort of some greening and enhancement of planting. So that's very much work in progress at the moment. And I'm very conscious we are due to come to the Environment and Infrastructure Scrutiny Committee at the beginning of September with an update report as well, which will add more detail around that narrative for you, Councillor Carr.
Okay, anything else? No. So are we happy to move on to the next KPI? Yep, right.
Thank you, Chair. So the next KPI is around the leisure park programme. So again, this sort of dashboard is reflecting that this is on track and where we're expecting to be for sort of Q4 23-24. It's very much focused around the outline business case that's been produced for the Aquadrome, which was approved by Cabinet in February 2024. Since then, there's been a huge amount of work behind the scene by officers on the procurement route that we're going to take, as we are going to be undertaking a DBOM, it's called, which is a design, build, operate and maintain tender process. It's quite a complex tender process, and it probably involves more work up front with a longer tender period because you are doing the whole service more comprehensively. But the key benefits of a DBOM process mean that you are getting operator engagement at the earliest opportunity to then shape exactly what that offer is going to be. So we're sort of working through that. That is on programme. We will be sort of going out to the market beginning of November to start that procurement exercise, with a view to then obviously running alongside maintaining the existing aquadrome facility so that we can seamlessly transfer that service provision into the new building. Alongside that, there's the leisure park sort of wider master plan and programme. We continue to have conversations with operators about interest. We obviously can't go into too much detail here because they are commercial discussions at the moment. But the master plan identified development plots within the leisure centre as well. So we are very much actively still pursuing opportunities to get more leisure operators into the leisure park. And a task and finish group will be reporting back at the next Environment and Infrastructure Committee on the leisure park master plan, where they've specifically looked at tasks around prioritisation of some public realm elements and some of the concepts that were in that master plan to test their appropriateness, and again how they could perhaps be prioritised and then brought forward as programmes. We're also working with Milestones Museum. They are currently undertaking some feasibility work to look at enhance their attraction. So quite obviously, as well as ongoing tenant liaisons with existing stakeholders and tenants to get them to constantly improve and sort of vary their leisure offers where necessary. Don't think I've got anything more to update on that one, but the key project here is around the new leisure centre.
All right, committee, any questions? No. Can I welcome? Sorry.
I do, but I'm loath to go into pink papers already.
Well, no, we'll have to do that
At the end.
later on.
Okay.
Is that
That's
okay?
fine.
Yeah, we can't go
Yes,
into pink
yeah,
papers now.
No, that's fine.
No. Okay. Councillor Tony Jones.
Right, I just wanted to make a comment on the leisure park. Just the fact that, you know, it's taken so long, obviously. We all, well, some of us, not most, some of us know more about it than others. Just the fact that while we're developing it, some of the buildings are looking really scruffy and whatever, you know. How do we keep them up to standard? Because some of these are obviously private people, but I drove through there, well, with the elections and different things, and you're looking at them, it looks what it is, an old leisure park falling to bits, if I was perfectly honest. I just wondered whether you've had any comments from the public or anything like that.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So no, we haven't had comments specifically from the public, but you know, are fully aware that the estate is an aged estate in some respects. Obviously, the property and assets team oversee that contractually. Lots of the properties are on long leaseholds, and the repair and maintenance obligations are with those tenants. But when it's appropriate for us as landlord to intervene, we will do so. I get your point about it, you know, being longer term and development's taken a while on some of these plots, but equally I think there's a balance there, and you know, we are pleased to be able to report there are some new lettings coming through. For example, GridServe, where we're looking at getting an EV charging forecourt in, that's going to be coming through in the next sort of 6 to 9 months. So there are some short term as well as some longer term developments that we're working on there. But take your point. Alongside that, obviously the property team are working on a marketing refresh. They're looking at the general environment of the leisure park to make sure that we're maintaining the public realm, the lighting, etc. And that would, you know, be covered as part of a service charge.
Okay, thank you. Can I welcome Councillor Jenkin to the meeting? Any other questions? Councillor Golding.
Thank you. This is almost a format kind of comment, I suppose. But it's quite, not that I don't trust you, but it's quite difficult to kind of make a sort of judgment on this because it's just green, 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 but you haven't told me what you were trying to achieve, so therefore it's quite difficult to say, yes, well done, you've achieved it, you're doing a great job, which is what I'd love to say. And I'm sure it's true, but it would be helpful to have like a bit more detail on like the dates and the milestones that you were trying to reach, so that we could understand a bit more and congratulate you.
I have to say that I find that I support that. I think it would be helpful to understand what the targets were, so that we can decide here whether we think the green that has been awarded is correct. And so that's perhaps a recommendation that could come from the committee generally. Is that, are we agreed with that? Yeah, okay.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back? I think that's a very good point. I think, we are in that transition period where I think there is a recognition that a couple of the KPIs, particularly around the town centre strategy and the leisure park, were very broad. And I would love to sit here and be congratulated as well, thank you. But I think, back to Katie's earlier comment about linking them over the next monitoring to key project milestones, I think that will clearly be able to track progress then.
Right, can we then move on to the next KPI? Oh, sorry, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. It just goes really to your point on formatting and presentation of it. I think it's very impressive that we've got a number of measures that are green, red, amber, but at no point have we got any context as to where that was this time last year either. Like, have we progressed on anything, or are we going backwards? And I think that would be good to be reflected in a future update, is that at this point, this time of year, we've got 8 that are amber, and next time, we have, say, 16 that are red. Where is it that we've had the slippages from? Is it from the greens, from the reds, from the, just a formatting kind of presentational point, really?
Okay, so that if we could add that to the recommendation. Right, any other questions? No, right. If we can move on to the next KPI, please, Sarah.
Apologies, I've lost the order in my slide. I was trying to find that one. I've jumped to my next one. Katie, what page is that?
It's page 28 of the report.
Thank you, found it. Apologies there. So this KPI is split between myself and Tom Payne as sort of broadens across regeneration and environment and community services, and this is around sort of the smaller community regeneration improvement projects, including the play area improvements, and is obviously monitoring against capital spend for play, open space and community. It sort of incorporates some improvements to community centre facilities as well, and sort of in the what underpins the programme in measures section, it lists those community buildings and the work that's been undertaken there. Probably don't have much more to report, as obviously spend is being tracked against those funds and those improvements are taking place. I will just take the opportunity to just check with Tom to make sure there's nothing I'm missing on this item, if that's okay.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Sarah, this is really good. My question is, so it says on here, more schemes delivered is good, which is great. However, more schemes that are more good schemes that are delivered is better. How do we know that the schemes that we've delivered are they've been well received, are providing a benefit to the community, that they're up to the standard that we were after when we first looked into it. Thank you.
So I think with regards to the sort of physical building improvements, which is mainly focused around the community centres, where there are sort of internal improvements, roof, boiler replacements. Obviously there's direct feedback from those community associations and tenants, and there's obviously the knock-on benefits of having much better buildings to operate within. I think, you know, some of these works are necessary. They're on our sort of programme of maintenance. So I think, you know, and again, it's about balancing it with environmental improvements as well, which will have a raft of benefits for the tenants, you know, including reduced running costs, operational costs as well. I think with regards to sort of open space improvements and sort of play improvements, I would defer to Tom on feedback directly from those residents that are accessing that. But I think, you know, on the whole, the play improvements and open space improvements are delivered to a very high standard, and we get good resident satisfaction and feedback. But I again would just defer to Tom in case he has any further comments.
Councillor Jones.
It's a quick one. The only thing that's bothering me, and I might be totally out of order on this one, roofs on community buildings, does that not come out of property services rather than regeneration? Because at the end of the day, it's nice, there is a sum of money, but we want it to go further, and if we weren't regenerating as such, property services would have to do that work on the building to keep it up to standard. And I can't see where we're mixing the two. I can understand the boilers, I can understand the interior stuff, because that's the community itself, but the actual fabric of the building outside doesn't come under, as I understand it, I might be totally wrong, does not come under the community to look after, it comes under property services.
So apologies, I don't know the detail of every lease, but I think you're probably right in that general summary. You know, obviously under the Regeneration Directorate now, property and assets are within my portfolio. So within the operational estates assets, there will be obligations on us as landlord to maintain on these properties, and there will be tenant obligations on the internal you know, repair and maintenance obligations as well. So all of that's considered as part of that asset management programme, and then obviously we take the opportunity to add value and look at what other sustainable and environmental improvements could be made to our property portfolio.
Right, I see that Councillor Harvey wants to say something.
Just to add to the conversation, a number of the schemes on that list also relate to Section 106 monies. For example, White Ditch at the bottom, and some of those schemes are co-designed by residents, they're involved directly in the processes, but some of them will be linked to the actual agreement signed for 106s as to what the expectation was at the time of signing the 106, as you well know. So it's part of that relationship between members in terms of 106, communities who obviously help shape that, and then the co-design of what's delivered. And my own personal example in terms of White Ditch, the regeneration of that park as a destination park has been incredibly well received and incredibly successful, and you can see that replicated through a number of the schemes on there, such as the Ridgeway Community Centre with the replacement boiler, which is something that's been after for a long time. It's been on the list for a long time.
Okay, right. Councillor Golding.
Thank you. So this is going to be a recurrent theme because I'm a quantitative girl, I'm afraid, not particularly qualitative. So the delivery of schemes that fit the improvement profile outlined within the KPI description is really vague. And yet you talk in the why is this measure important, that you achieved a total spend of 96% of the revised capital budget, which seems like a much more sensible way of trying to measure your progress. Like, you know, actually our target is to spend 95% of this and have some good surveys for Councillor Lee, who's obviously much more qualitative than I am, but I appreciate his comment too.
Councillor Bound.
Yeah, I don't know whether this applies generally to some of the schemes that are mentioned down here, but Tadley Community Centre, which had work on its roof. I believe that they then found out after that the roof had been completed that it wasn't sufficiently strong to take things like solar panels. So I wonder whether there was any sort of forward thinking in terms of our declared intention for improvements in terms of energy saving, in terms of what was done on some of these projects.
Thank you. So I'm not aware of the specifics on Tadley, but obviously as part of any works they would be doing building surveys, and obviously bearing in mind our sustainability and environmental agenda and our aspiration to fit solar on. Those certainly going forward, I know those underlying surveys are being done on our properties to ensure that roofs can take loadings of what's being proposed in the future.
Okie doke. So, any other questions, comments? No. Okay, so we can now move to the next KPI, please, Sarah.
So this KPI is very much intrinsically linked actually to the town centre strategy KPI. This is around greening the town centre. So as I mentioned earlier, there is a priority on the top of town, and at the moment, as we're working through sort of the short-term interventions, we're looking at how we can actively green the town centre through enhancing planting schemes, looking at improving biodiversity, and looking at where there are pockets of green space, how we can further enhance those. So this is going to be very much captured by the action plan that we are sort of currently working on. Don't have much more to say on that one, other than that it is obviously at the fore of the action plan, and that will certainly be delved into more detail at the Environment and Infrastructure Committee meeting.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Cutt.
I think, Mr. Chairman, there's going to be a bit of a theme tonight about how these are presented. I think we need to think carefully about our KPIs going forwards. Again, it's just quite vague, and if you're a resident just looking at this, it's difficult to establish exactly what we hope to achieve from this, and there doesn't seem to be anything on the sort of what it underpins this measure. There's not much narrative about what we've actually done. I think it's very useful to hear about what we've been doing in terms of greening the town centre in various ways, but it does seem to me that, again, I think it comes to that point about the town centre, it's about seeing tangible progress to move this from a sort of an amber delivery to a green delivery. I think it would be useful to understand, you mentioned biodiversity, sort of what kind of biodiversity delivery have we seen? I know a lot of this is likely to come out in the committee meeting later this year, but I think it does seem a little bit bold to refer to this as a green target rather than an amber one. It feels like things are very much in progress. Equally, I just think we need to be more specific, both in terms of what we're asking of a KPI, and then when we're reporting what we've actually delivered against it.
Right, thank you. Any other contributions? Councillor Julian Jones.
Yes, I think this could be another that where we need to see progress year to year. If this is meaning planting of trees and whatever, it would be useful to know whether they survived from year to year. We have quite a record of planting trees that don't survive.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to agree with Councillor Carr, agreeing with a Tory is probably not normally in my background. However, yeah, this seems quite woolly, and it says that we're aiming to develop and deliver schemes to green the town centre, and yet we're green as a RAG status, yet we haven't defined anything yet. So how can we claim to be a green in a RAG status when we've got no actionable things to deliver against yet? And it's just some discrepancies there, really, that maybe need to be looked into on that.
Yeah, it seems to me to be a theme that's emerging here from the committee, and a recommendation that we need to understand what the tangible targets are, and so that we can see the extent to which those targets have been met, and there's evidence that they've been met, rather than the sort of broad conclusion that a green or a red or an amber status has been met. It looks too much like self-marking in that sense. So I think there's an improvement that we could seek there. Katie, yes.
Yes, we recognise when we've gone through this year that these words are not tight enough for you to be able to truly judge. And so that is something that is addressed in our approach for next year, what you will see for the next quarter, where there are key milestones. What we've also done is shown what would make something red, amber or green. So you would have that moving forward as well. So all of the things you're raising are addressed in 24-25's measures.
So we might invite you at an early point to come along and tell us what your targets are, rather than being on the receiving end of them after a quarter or whatever. So that's something that committee might like to consider. Councillor Lee.
I mean, just judged on this one piece though, what are you going to do in terms of reflecting the fact that we don't agree that this is green? It's green on time, brilliant. But what about the rest of the bits that go underneath that? And can we as a committee say, actually, we don't agree that that's green, and throw that back to the relevant people to come back up with a new assessment?
I think that we can make that comment, but I don't think we're in a position. This is a report for noting at the end of the day. But looking ahead, we're making recommendations that we would hope will be taken account of in the way that this process moves forward in the future. I see Councillor Harvey's wanting to contribute.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I'm listening and I hear what you're saying. And I think there's another aspect to this, which is in recent years we've changed how we've done this. So we've gone from pure numbers that didn't have any textual context to them at all, and you were trying to interpret what was behind the number, to a narrative in the way that it's presented. And there's going to be a happy medium in all of this, and Katie and the team are working on it, because I know we've challenged as Cabinet, you've challenged as officers throughout the process. So this is an evolving process, to say the least, and we will get it right. But I welcome what you're saying this evening, because it's helpful, I think, for us.
Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, and this isn't a reflection of the officers. They're working within the boundaries of what they've been given to work with, and that comes from leadership, whether that's political or senior leadership. Just a comment, Chair, in relation to obviously this is a report that is to be noting, but also to note that we are an overview and scrutiny committee. So how are we? If we're just noting it, we're not scrutinising it properly, and we're not, providing the right overview on that. So, to me, that just seems like, why are we here doing this if we're not then going to make the relevant recommendations to have a proper report that is reflective of where this council is?
Well, I think we will. I would hope we will have impact, and we are scrutinising it. We're making constructive comments. We're making constructive criticism, and I would expect that to be reflected in the next quarter's update that we'll receive. So we won't have long to wait.
Yesterday, wasn't it?
Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thanks, Councillor Lee. Take on board those comments, and I think for me, this one particularly, it's a golden thread that kind of runs through a lot of our regeneration and place-based activities around greening, improving biodiversity and improving the place. So we'll take that away and think about maybe how we link that into the town centre strategy one, where we can come up with more tangible project outputs for you that can be scrutinised, because I think to me this presents, obviously it's that golden thread which we all endorse and agree with. It's how we translate that.
Right, okay. So is that your final KPI, Sarah? It is, right. You're released, for the time being at least. But you may have to be around later on, I'm afraid. Thank you both. Right, so Sarah Cragg is the next officer to come forward, please. Good evening, Sarah.
I promise you we do employ people that aren't called Sarah. Good evening, councillors. So for those that I've not met, my name is Sarah Cragg and I'm the Head of Human Resources and Organisational Development at the Council. So I've got 4 KPIs on the list this evening. So the first, as per the screen, is KPI 3.21, which is staff engagement. So I just wanted to mention this, although we don't have statistics to report on it. So just to confirm that our next whole staff survey is planned to take place later this summer. But just to assure everyone, that's obviously not to say, as you would expect, that we haven't been hearing from staff over the last 12 months. We absolutely have been. We've had a number of topic-specific surveys, such as related to how the Smarter Ways of Working programme is operating in practice, and also on our internal communication methods, which came off the back of the previous peer review. In addition, we've run a number of focus groups across the organisation for staff on topics like internal communication methods, and also to help us shape and develop our new council values. So we've done lots of engagement and communication with staff, but as I say, our main whole survey is due to take place later this summer.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for Sarah? Any comments? Councillor Carr.
Just a question, 2 questions really, I suppose, 2 comments. The first is, would we think that 70% is a sufficiently high number in terms of return to take a full view of perception among staff? Is that a sort of an industry benchmark, as it were? And then the second point is, I wonder whether this is the right way of measuring staff engagement. You mentioned there were a number of ongoing staff surveys, work to communicate with staff. I just wonder whether a single moment once a year and the rate of return on that really adequately captures the level of engagement that you were describing there, the various levels of engagement outside of this one moment. So is this KPI actually capturing what we need it to?
So I think inevitably with something as complex and multifaceted as staff engagement, it's incredibly difficult to come up with a single measure, but clearly it's something that's very important to us as an organisation. As you've referred to in relation to previous KPIs, I'm really keen that we have something that is tangible and measurable. That's not to say that that's the only piece of work we will do around staff engagement, but I think it is really important that we do have a measure and an indicator to work from, and it is fairly typical that that is done through staff surveys, albeit again, and I can absolutely tweak the wording because I appreciate that isn't clear. When we're talking about the 70%, we're talking about the 70% staff engagement, not a 70% response rate to the survey, but I appreciate that isn't clear, so I can amend that. So I think, although this is a single KPI, this will be referring to a number of questions in the survey, and again, it's fairly good practice that you don't just ask a question around how engaged staff are, because that's really difficult to answer as a member of staff. So what you're asking is questions around, understanding of job role, around understanding where people are in the organisation, around appetite to remain or leave within the organisation. And typically you would have a number of those sorts of questions and then create a sort of composite measure, if you like, from that around staff engagement. But absolutely really committed that that one survey is not the only piece we will do around staff engagement. It is something we do on an ongoing basis, but it is helpful to have some measure that we can discuss and that can be scrutinised around that.
Okay, does that mean we only get one measure a year on staff engagement?
So yes, that measure is in, or was in, bearing in mind this is for last year's KPIs, so that was in as an annual measure, yes.
But we might in future look then for more measures that would be reported quarterly, different measures.
So the KPIs for this coming year have been set and staff engagement is in there again as an annual measure. Again, there are other KPIs that I'll talk about in a minute, things like sickness, absence and turnover, that again are part of that picture, I suppose, around staff engagement. So it certainly isn't a single one that tells a story, but there's an element where they all work together to give you an overall picture around staff within the organisation.
Thank you, yeah. Councillor Tuck.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask you, are we going to have visibility of that survey and the results from it? Because I'd like a bit more granularity on this than a sort of number at the end. And secondly, does that include any continuous professional development? So I'd also like to look at, we've sent, 200 people on this kind of course, or am I asking for that in the wrong place?
I think yes, that this is not about that particular KPI. It's noted the things you want to see, so we can take that outside of the meeting, but not in here. Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. So at the moment we've got no measures on this because the survey's due to take place. Was one taken last year, which would effectively should be for the period that this report's written for?
No, as I say, apologies. The next survey is due to take place in the summer, so we didn't have a whole survey in relation to this measure in the 12-month period that this is covering, because we were doing a number of individual surveys and a number of focus groups, so there was a lot happening in terms of engagement and getting staff views, but they were about specific areas of work that we were looking at rather than something that was across the whole organisation. As I say, that's due to happen in a couple of months' time.
So no whole survey was conducted last year, it was just the individuals. This year you're doing a whole survey and the additional kind of smaller pieces as well.
So last year we knew there were some things that we did need to look at. So for example, we'd introduced hybrid working, so it was important we did some work to understand how that was working. We also knew from the peer review that internal communications was an area that warranted further looking at. So that's why we particularly looked at those areas in quite a lot of detail, and we knew we wanted to develop some new council values. Clearly what will happen this time is we're doing the survey in a couple of months' time. That may well give us other areas that we then need to look at in more detail, so that will help to then inform what the programme is for the rest of the year, if you like. So the survey will be the kind of benchmark and the start point of that, and then we'll see if there are particular topics that come out of that we need to follow up in more detail.
Thank you. And is this survey going to be for it's the whole staff on the council, not just those that are office based? And if I'm assuming that it is for all the staff, how are those that are in remote, as in the grounds maintenance teams, how are they accessing that survey and how are they being encouraged to take part? Because a lot of the time they're out doing a busy job and don't have the time to then follow up with emails and stuff.
Thank you. We have absolutely run these whole organisational surveys before, and whilst the majority of it is done through an online survey platform, we do also have paper versions of the survey available for those staff that aren't regularly online. We've also had members of my team going out and spending time in the depots and sort of talking to staff as required around the survey and why it's important. But it is an area of continued focus because it's really important. We hear from that big group of staff, bearing in mind you're looking at about a fifth of our workforce who don't work hybrid and who are out on the front line, as it were. So absolutely, it's really important we hear from those staff.
Right. Any other questions or comments? So, Sarah, does that mean we get the results of this survey in the next quarter's update?
So they won't be sitting, I guess, as part of the KPI. The KPI in itself is the measure as set out. But as Katie alluded to, clearly if there are other things that you want to look at as a committee, then obviously I'll leave that with you, with Katie, in terms of your work programme.
Councillor.
Chair, can I guess put a recommendation that we do see the results of that survey, and not just the results, but also kind of the mitigating or the what factors we're going to do to address some of the challenges. I think it's certainly prudent to act quickly on those. I know we do it in my workplace. As a principal delivery lead, I get results as soon as it closes to then try and action and address.
So I think the only comment I would add to that is obviously we do have a separate Human Resources Committee, and in the same reason as we were trying to streamline this by not bringing it to two committees, I think there is a question about where that needs to go. But again, that's probably not a question for us to resolve at this moment.
Right. I think, Sarah, then we can invite you to move on to the next KPI, please, which is 3.22 staff turnover.
Yes, so this is staff turnover by reason of voluntary resignation. The detail is really as set out in the paper, so I'm not going to read that through for you, but happy to take any questions that anyone has in relation to that KPI.
Councillor Golding.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know your thoughts on the trends, because obviously Q3, hardly anyone resigned, and then Q4, an unexpected number of people resigned. So what are there any trends that, exit interview themes, that kind of thing?
So no, there wasn't anything specifically that we picked up. So again, our exit interviews is something that we do review and is part of the conversation at HR committee. So there weren't any specifics. I think it's fair to say that sort of post-COVID, we've seen a kind of general continued sort of increase, I guess, in terms of general turnover amongst the sector and more widely across society. But there was nothing specific that was of concern. And again, just really want to make the point, and it is in this paper, but this is obviously cumulative across the period. So although we were slightly over the target that had been set, which is why it's amber, that equates to essentially 2.5 people more than the target across 12-month period. So again, I want to be really clear that that's not an indication of a kind of significant concern or kind of mass exodus of individuals across the organisation. Clearly, we absolutely keep an eye on turnover, and we do offer exit interviews to all staff who leave the organisation and try and actively encourage people to engage in those. So it is a really important source of information, but as I say, this being amber isn't an indication of huge numbers of individuals leaving the organisation, and I think it's really important just to say that.
Councillor Lee.
Sorry, Chair, maybe this is just my look on and take on numbers rather than anything else. So the way it's written here on the table is that that's a cumulative growth over the course of the year. Is that what you're saying? So again, presentationally, I guess I'd look to have each quarter written as the number for that quarter rather than the growth of, so that we can see where we are going backwards rather, like you said, it's just a cumulative growth throughout the year, but we don't actually see that, Q2 is less than Q1, right? It's again, Q3 is less than Q2 and Q1. If you actually present those as a quarter total rather than an overall total.
And I think what I would say is in the KPIs for this current year, turnover is an annual reporting rather than quarterly. I think in an organisation of our size, we have relatively small numbers of individuals leaving on a quarterly basis. What's really helpful, I think, is to look at that annual figure against those kind of targets, but also to be able to compare that year on year, because it is that year on year figure where you actually start to see those trends in terms of what's happening across the organisation, because there are always variances across quarters for all sorts of different reasons.
Councillor Bound.
The 9% that we got down here, is that a local government benchmark?
So no, there aren't set benchmarks for us to follow. So this, I think, is an assessment based on the kind of best practice and what you see across sort of sectors, I guess, in terms of what an appropriate level of turnover is. I say appropriate because I think it is important that we do need to balance retaining that organisation intelligence and the knowledge that our staff have with that introduction of new ideas and experiences. So a level of turnover is always A, expected, and B, arguably something that assists the organisation, but too much turnover is destabilising. So you're always trying to reach that kind of optimum level. So this is what we felt was a kind of appropriate optimum level. Again, for this year, we've done that as a range rather than a set target, because again, it's very difficult to say that 8.9% would be very damaging to the organisation and 9.1 is really positive. What you're looking at is a sort of optimum range of turnover, really, to indicate whether it's a significant issue or not.
Councillor Julian Jones.
As has been pointed out, the numbers are very small, so it's not terribly relevant. But the horizontal line of the 9%, one wonders whether that should actually be more of a diagonal to show that if it's going to be presented as a quarterly figure rather than that one horizontal line.
Right. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Golding.
So this is a more generic thing than just you, but when I was reading through the report, what I feel like I'm missing is a bit of an action plan if something's amber or red, because obviously we want to be green, so that puts you on the spot, therefore, as what are you planning to do anything about it, or do you genuinely think we don't need to?
That's really difficult. I mean, I don't think I would ever say, you wouldn't expect me to as a head of HR to kind of say we don't need to do anything about any indication of staff. Absolutely we do. I think the point I was making was 2.5 individuals above target across a 12-month period does not suggest a significant problem around staff turnover, but clearly there's a lot that we do in terms of staff retention. So the huge work we did around pay and benefits review, absolutely staff retention was a big part of that. We have a huge health and wellbeing programme. We do a lot around learning and development, and again we talk a lot about those at HR committee in terms of the kind of things that we're doing. So absolutely we would be continuing to look at those and to scrutinise any exit interview information we have in terms of understanding why individuals are leaving and whether there is anything that we could have done. You know, some in terms of family relocation and other things, there are minimal things that you can do. There may be other circumstances where there are things that we could have done, and absolutely it's important that we act on those. But again, the numbers are relatively small, so some of those are quite isolated things, but absolutely we would take account of them because, you know, we would view that as important for every member of staff.
Councillor Lee.
Do you take exit interviews and the actions off of that? You know, what are you doing with those? And just also, maybe this isn't the place to answer that question because it is a human resources thing, and this is maybe a thing for Councillor Harvey, is that the terms of like this committee's remit does cover human resources, but it sounds like we've got a human resources committee, and maybe we just need to tighten up what this committee's responsible for so that we don't have that overlap.
Happy to take that away, and it was a conversation of the Constitutional Working Party, I could assure you.
Okay, so any other comments on this particular KPI? I suppose the thing is that there is a tangible, measurable target here, and which is good. And you've ended up on the amber side, missing the target in a very modest way. But at least I think the committee understands that, but it seems to be a good approach in looking at the various KPIs to the extent that's possible. Right, Sarah. Is there anything else in terms of KPIs from you?
Yeah, I do have another two, I'm afraid. So the next one is 3.23, which is average work days lost due to sickness absence. Again, I think I would position that as I did with the previous one. I think I've tried to put the detail in there in terms of what that means and what that's telling us, but I'm very happy to take any questions that any of the committee have.
More of a comment, Chair, and maybe it's how I'm reading the graph. It appears that you've shown this graph as quarterly numbers rather than the cumulative total. So again, just some inconsistencies between what's we're being shown. If we can just tighten those up, that'd be great. Thank you.
And just to confirm that for this year, sickness is something that we will be continuing to show quarterly, so it will kind of look like that moving forward.
Any other contributions? No? Okay, so we can move swiftly on to your next KPI, Sarah.
So this is the last one from me, which is 3.24, and this is the percentage of staff undertaking an apprenticeship. So again, we were amber on this. The difference in that was one individual who was currently undertaking an apprenticeship qualification who left the organisation immediately prior to the reporting. Again, that's not to say that these aren't important, but I think it's important to understand the magnitude of what the difference between amber and green was around this. This is a measure that isn't being reported for this year, and the reason for that is not that apprenticeships aren't really important, but it's one type of development and one type of route into the organisation. There are many more. This was originally included because it was a government target, which was then removed. But again, to assure the committee, this is something we will continue to report on at HR committee, so it's not a KPI we're going to lose. But I just don't think on its own it's an indicator of organisational health or kind of staff organisational health, if you like. But again, really important to say we continue to be committed to apprenticeships. As in the narrative in the most updated figure, we currently have 10 people undertaking apprenticeship specific roles, with 3 on upskilling apprenticeships, and we have a number of individuals that we're looking to do upskilling apprenticeships with for some of their professional qualification development in a recent round of applications we have. So it's something we continue to focus on and to prioritise as an organisation, because it's a really useful route into the organisation, but also a way of upskilling staff through the apprenticeship levy.
Thank you. Right. Anyone got any questions? Councillor Golding.
Perhaps I'm being pernickety, but please could you explain why quarter 1 at 2.3 was green, but quarter 4 at 2.42 is amber?
That's a very good question.
And that is what we will be able to avoid, that sort of thing moving forward, because we'll say what the parameters are, to be clear.
Okay. Right. If there's no other questions, we can let you go, Sarah. And thank you very much. Right. If we can welcome Jenny Jackson as the next officer to. Right, good evening, Jenny. And your first KPI is 1.01, the first one, which is the local plan adoption.
Thank you, Chair. I have sought to explain that on the papers, so any questions anybody has on progress of the local plan, happy to take them.
Any questions?
Chair, maybe I'm being a little bit, I don't know what the word is, picky on this, but to me this just seems like the basics as to like the role of the council, and having a KPI around it is maybe a little bit too much. Like this is just the general kind of work that we should be doing, and I don't know what we've achieved by having a KPI on it.
I think, Chair, all I can say is that we are required as a council to have a local plan that is up to date. The new government has made it explicit that it expects every council to have a local plan and that there will be universal coverage. There are many councils who do not have an up-to-date plan and are not progressing a local plan. So on that basis, given that the planning system is meant to be plan-led, I would counter that, Councillor Lee, by saying I think it is helpful for you as a scrutiny committee to understand that a plan is being progressed.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not. I think where I agree with Councillor Lee is that this KPI is not terribly ambitious. All it asked is that a Regulation 18 consultation had sort of progressed, but I don't think this gives you a great deal of time milestones on the rest of the local plan process. So perhaps one thing we need to think about is including the sort of the information on the local development scheme and how we're being marked progress against that. So I think we need to think about how this is presented. But I think my more substantive point is really thinking ahead to the coming year. We know that the new Labour government is bringing in a change to the National Planning Policy Framework before Parliament goes on recess. So really, I'd be keen to understand from you how you see that impacting on the KPIs for our local plan, how you see that change affecting the forward process of the local plan from the KPI perspective.
If I may, Chair, through you, thank you for the question. So the current, the local plan that we are progressing is being progressed under the National Planning Policy Framework that was published in 2022 and in the transitional arrangements of the 2023 National Planning Policy Framework. Therefore, a plan is required to be submitted for examination by the 30th of June next year. So that is a milestone, if you like, that's been set by government. You wouldn't find that milestone in the local development scheme, which itself was adopted by council before I started in this role, so several years ago. So the LDS is a formal council adopted document, would have gone to full council. It's available on the website. But perhaps, Katie, we can pick up that point about milestones for future.
Councillor Carr.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what would be useful would be clarification following the publication of the NPPF at the end of this month as to how we believe that will affect the next KPI for the local plan. I'm sure we will get a broader update at the Environment and Infrastructure Committee, but I think we would need to understand how that will change the KPIs for the local plan going forwards. I think it's quite important that we get clarification before the next scrutiny committee, or rather resources committee, how that publication will affect the local plan KPIs going forwards.
Chair, if I might just come back on that. I think my understanding is it will be a consultation on the National Planning Policy Framework that we see before Parliament enters a recess for the summer, that I expect will give us in the planning sector some holiday reading so that we can produce responses that government will consider in the autumn before it actually does publish a final NPPF. So I think in that regard, and I do take the point, a new National Planning Policy Framework isn't going to impact on the key performance indicators for this local plan because it's been prepared under a previous version. It may, however, obviously impact on a future local plan, as that will be a requirement for the council to do a new local plan every 5 years.
Thank you, Jenny. Any other questions on this topic? No? Okay. Thank you, Jenny. If you could move to your next KPI.
Sorry, Chair, apologies. I managed to scroll right to the end of the document. I had to go back up again. Yes, so the other 4 KPIs for the planning service are all business as usual. Just think about Councillor Lee's initial point. So this first one is about performance in relation to speed of determination of major planning applications. Major applications are 10 or more dwellings or more than 1,000 square metres of floor space or sites of over 1 hectare in area. Performance across the year is at 96%. Based on Councillor Golding, your previous questions about understanding whether that represents an improving picture or otherwise, I have had a chance just to check back on what that means in relation to previous years. So government measures the speed of decisions in 2-year periods. So we do have an improving trend. In the 2020-2022 period, we were at 77%. In the following 2-year periods, 21 to 23, we're at 78%. And then in the current period, we're at 85.45%. And that's how government measures performance on planning applications.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay. I think we could go to the next one then, please, Jenny.
Yep, so the next one, I'm careful to scroll down so I don't go too far. So planning performance in relation to non-major applications, that's obviously everything else, single dwellings and the like. Again, we are showing an improving pattern of performance at 86.69% across this year, and we're trying to achieve a target of 85%.
Any questions on this? Councillor Lee.
I think we are, well done for getting it above, just above. I would, however, looking at that graph, disagree with the statement of the trend is going upwards. Because to me that looks like it's going, although it's only very small, that trend does look downwards. Are we, and maybe again another question for another time, but is that trend going back the right way rather than continuing on a downward trend, which is what that graph seems to show?
Chair, through you, it was 86% last year, so I think it's showing a consistent position. I think the question, Councillor Lee, is how do we improve that above that, sort of sitting just above the target for future years, which is something that we will be exploring as a service.
Thank you. I must say, as a ward councillor, I find that a lot of the issues I have to deal with from residents are around planning applications and the length of time that they take. So I wasn't expecting to see such a high performance in terms of actually dealing with things within the 8 week. We're dealing with the applications within the 8 week statutory time frame. Am I just unfortunate in representing an area where there are people who present difficulties for the planning team?
I'm not going to comment on that point, Chairman, but what I will say is that the indicator does include where we agree extensions of time with applicants to enable them to amend an application so that we can approve it.
Interesting. Right, Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wondered if I could explore the comparator with our neighbours. So with this KPI and with its predecessor, there's a reference to our being sort of 15th of 16 compared to our near neighbours. What is it that we're not doing as well as our neighbours? I mean, how are they outperforming us? I think it would be useful to understand if we are not performing as well as our neighbours, how divergent we are. Is it very significant? Is it relatively minor? What are they doing differently?
Yes, a good point. I think one of the issues I have here is that the latest Office for Local Government data is actually from 2020 to 2022. So it's not the current period at all. We've had 2 subsequent periods since then, and there's no up-to-date data available. I think as and when that is available, that's something that I'd be happy to explore, yes.
Pursuing my point, it would be quite helpful to know how many of the applications are subject to extensions of time. Is that something you could provide the committee?
Yes, that's provided. It's online, it's open source data. We have to do returns to government, so that is something that I could provide as a follow-up, Chairman, yes. It's also worth saying that the previous government indicated that was something they intended to phase out, which could be considered to be a retrograde step, given that that's the basis that enables us to agree amendments to make applications acceptable in line with your policies. The alternative is obviously that we refuse more applications and then an applicant has to go back through the process. But yes, I can provide that information.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Councillor Golding.
You might not be able to answer this, but I'm just curious as to why there's quite a big difference in targets between the major applications and the minor applications in terms of how many we're expected to turn around in time. Obviously, you're doing government kind of suggested targets, but why are they so different?
I'm not sure, Chair. I can only assume that it's because the larger applications perhaps have more of an impact in terms of economic activity in an area and deliver additional homes. But that is pure speculation on my part.
Okie dokie. Right. Any other questions? So, Jenny, if we could go to the next KPI.
Right, so then we come on to performance in relation to planning appeal decisions, which is where it gets slightly more complicated because the local key performance indicator isn't measured in the same way as the national planning performance indicator in terms of major appeal decisions. So as you can see, this is a KPI where we read against the target and quite significantly based on the council's local performance indicator. So what I have provided in the commentary on the slide is some information about where that means that we sit in relation to the government's performance data, which again is measured over a 2-year period, but with a 9-month lag added for planning appeal decisions to be issued by the Planning Inspectorate. We are actually also showing an improving trend in this respect. As I've said in the commentary, we have been at 14.4%. In the last period, we ended at 11.29% for government, and in the current period, because we're still in a lag period for appeal decisions, we're at just over 5% in terms of major appeals that have been allowed. So I'm also going to pick up, Chair, in my introduction that this is something that we do have an action plan against. So the Planning Advisory Service, which is part of the Local Government Association, has been in to support the council in its endeavour to bring that back in line with target. It did some considerable work with the Development Control Committee in October of last year, so before I started with you, on how we might make more defensible planning decisions, i.e. the right decisions that if they go to appeal will withstand scrutiny by a planning inspector and be dismissed. And I think we can see that that's where we're starting to bring that target back on track.
Thank you. Right, questions? Councillor Lee. I thought we'd stunned the committee then.
Sorry, no, and this isn't really a question to yourself. It's more, just looking at the numbers. This represents for the portfolio holder, 40% of his total measures that are within his ownership are red. So, just what as a cabinet are you going to make sure that this isn't a recurring theme for him?
I think I need to tread with real care here, because the cabinet has a role in support of the organisation, as far as, for example, bringing in the planning inspectors, bringing in the planning advisory service to support the Development Control Committee in its function. But this is a reality of the decisions made by the Development Control Committee, in the fact that they had chosen to reject applications and thus they have gone to appeal. So as an executive, we cannot and should not interfere in any way in this. This is a reflection of the work of a semi-judicial committee. It is a regulatory body. Now, they make the decisions based upon the democratic decisions that they make. In a sense, then we have to pick up the pieces afterwards in the context perhaps of how we might go about understanding the consequences of those decisions, which is obviously reflected here. So, yes, I think I would say the administration have provided every support that we can to our planning officers and separately to the Development Control Committee. But that's as far as our responsibility should go. And then it's up to whatever the Development Control Committee does with each application on its merits.
Right, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Golding.
I think I'm just really struggling to understand the graph and the data on this one. I'm really sorry. It says performance on the years is amber, 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 but the indicator is red. The graph is talking about 100% of appeals, but then our target's 14.4, which sounds horrific, but I don't think those percentages are the same percentages. Please help.
I think I've helpfully not told you or I what the local target is actually in the commentary, because I was fixed on the national targets. The 14.4 is where we were in terms of performance. So it's not that the national target is less than 10% of appeals against major application decisions should be allowed, whereas we just don't look at it in that way. We just look at the number of appeals that are allowed on major applications. So we don't compare it against the total number of decisions that we've made. When we come on to the next one, you'll see we do exactly the same thing. I think it makes it quite hard to bring that actually in on a target, and perhaps is something that bears further consideration in how we report that in future years, or the context that I provide, so it's of more assistance to you.
So is there a tension between our locally generated targets and what government is expecting of us, and that therein lies the confusion here?
Well, we're both trying to do the same thing in that it's better to have a lower number of appeals allowed, but it's how that's measured. And government's using this as an instrument to tell you whether we're making good quality decisions or not. I think in the sector it's always been considered to be a bit of a blunt instrument to look at, is the number of appeals allowed an indicator of the quality of the decisions that are being taken, which really reflects actually Councillor Harvey's point about these are decisions that are being taken by a Development Control Committee, so based on their assessment of applications at the time. So despite the fact that an appeal might be allowed, the committee may well think, well, that was the right decision that they took, and the inspector's decision is the wrong one.
Right. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I just think this is a good example of where DCLG sets you a target based upon its policy priorities. We have our own policy priorities that would relate to our local plan, would relate to everything that we set as our priorities, and you have two completely independent determinants, if you like. First of all, the Development Control Committee that comes to its own decision, and secondly, a planning inspector that will come to their own decision, that are totally and utterly beyond the control of both DCLG and us, because they are regulatory. They sit outside of the whole process. So it's almost as if we're being set up here in the way that it's set to provide some sense of a target that you're meant to achieve, but the reality is this is a democratic process and it's quite complicated, as I see it.
Yeah, but having said that, there are costs to the council involved in losing appeals, substantial costs, and therefore it's right that we should aim to lose as few appeals as possible as a council, and that should therefore form surely the targets that we set ourselves. And if Development Control Committee makes decisions which are overturned, then they need to be aware of the impact that they're having on performance and actually on the cost to the council of losing these appeals.
You are quite correct, but those cost elements should not form the decision they make at Development Control. You're right, they must be aware of them and in the context in which they set. But I wouldn't want to see a Development Control Committee making a decision based upon, I think this is going to cost us a lot of money if it goes to appeal. We've got to tread with real care here as to where the regulatory and the support function comes.
Yeah, but I hope they take account of it. Councillor Bound.
I have to disagree with the statements you just made, Chair. As somebody who sits on DC, we take each planning application as we see it and we make a decision. We are aware of cost implications of a planning inspector disagreeing with our decision. But I think as a committee, we do our very best in terms of the information that we've got in front of us, to the objectors and to the applicant, and we make our decision.
Thank you. It's good to have that contribution from you. Thank you, Councillor. No? Right, okay.
Just one, sorry. Obviously, we have got a new change of government now. Are we expecting a change in those numbers? Is there any talk on the underground of what might happen? Well, there are conversations that I had in various different forums, right? You're all sort of planning. Was it Geeks? I think you said it earlier that surely there is a forum somewhere where you're having conversations as to what the expected changes might be, right?
Chair, through you, I haven't heard any whisperings, if you like, that those figures will change. They might, though. So we are very much, I mentioned extensions of time. We are working on the basis that some of those things that we've been told will happen, and are looking at managing performance appropriately.
So, thank you. Moving on then, Jenny. Next. Oh, sorry, Councillor Golding. So
Sorry, Chair. I'm still stuck in my graph distress. Can we reformat it for next year so it looks at the percentage of appeals against all of the major applications? From the sounds of it, that sounds like what the government is tracking us on. Could we track the same thing? Because it's just 100% of one is 100%. Like, it just doesn't feel very representative necessarily of the overall work that the council is doing on major applications.
This is one where we have aligned ourselves with the government for 24-25, making this a far easier KPI then to understand and interpret.
Okie doke. So, next KPI, Jenny, please.
So we turn to performance in terms of non-major appeals. The local indicator is 10% or less than 10%. You'll see that's been significantly off target for the duration. Again, this is an issue where we're not looking at the number of appeals against decisions over the same time period as the national indicator. And I'm not sure that this is entirely corrected for 24-25 because I don't think it includes a 9-month lag for appeal decisions. So 29.3% was our position over the course of the year, which was of the number of appeals that we had on non-major applications, which was 58 appeals over the course of the year, 17 of those were allowed.
Sorry, any contributions on this one? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I suppose because these are non-major, quite a number of these will have gone through delegated powers as opposed to committee decision. But of course, a number will have ended up at committee as a result of objections or a call-in. I think what would be useful for us to understand is the extent to which these numbers reflect delegated powers versus committee decision, because they are different, quite different forums of decision, and that would then enable us to take a view on how the officer service is performing from that respect versus how the committee is performing. I just wonder whether when we're next presented with this, there is a way of dividing that up so you can make an assessment, because at the moment, because these figures are lumped together, I don't think you can distinguish between the soundness, as it were, of those two decision mechanisms.
Is that something you can do, Jenny? Yeah. Okay. I think actually it might be useful to have that provided sooner rather than later, actually, to the committee. Otherwise, it's going to get lost in the weeds, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Fine. So, any other points on this KPI? No. Is that your last one? Okay. Thank you very much, Jenny. So I now turn to Katie Salis.
So the first one of my measures is one that we will pick up in this year's resident survey, which is due to take place from August onwards, with the results coming in October. So if I move on to the customer experience strategy, which was a measure for this year. So for a number of years, we didn't have a customer strategy. And what we were aiming to do with this is to really get under the skin of what it is like as a customer of this council to access our services. So we tend to all work in our service areas, forgetting that you've got a customer that can make a journey through it. So if we think about report a fly tip, you might come through the contact centre, you're then going out to Tom's team in ops. What is that experience like for you? And what is it like for you however you contact the council, whether you choose to phone us or try and do things online? And so what this strategy is trying to do is use the insight of the data we hold as an organisation to get qualitative data from our customers who use our services, for us to then make improvements, to clarify what customers can expect and try to preempt them needing to contact us. So one of the principles we're looking to adopt is 360-degree feedback, so that we will proactively go out to you when we've resolved something or it's in progress. The strategy isn't a channel shift strategy. It is recognising that whilst many people want to contact the council online, and we will seek to optimise what we can put online, that actually there's still a significant amount of people who want to phone us. We also have people who still would rather meet us face to face, and we want your experience to be one of quality and clarity however you choose to contact the council. So this strategy was addressing all of those items. Also included in it is a review of our complaints process and the system we use for that. And the replacement CRM also forms part of this work, because that is how we will get out the updates to our customers. I think that's really probably enough of an introduction about the strategy. If there are any questions you wish to ask.
Any questions? Councillor Tuck.
This again is obviously, I'm conscious this is the strategy. Where would we see KPIs such as average speed of answer and call abandonment rate, please?
Those are held at a service plan level. But we do, for the contact centre, report on those on the members portal. That's put up there every week, what the performance of our contact centre is, and also of our local tax line. They're the two contact centre elements. We have how many web hits we've had on given topics, how many out of hours contacts we've had, and what our abandon rates are. So that's posted on the portal each week.
Councillor Julian Jones.
Are any of these figures confused by customers who don't know whether it's a responsibility of the council or Hampshire?
Absolutely. We've tried to address that in part by having a message up front on our telephone recordings to say if it is about X subjects, that's the county council, but residents don't understand the difference, so we still get a lot through. And if the contact centre have someone who's obviously struggling, they log the call for them through the county systems. But yes, it is an ongoing challenge of two-tier government.
Anyone else? So, Katie, so the target for this year was the implementation of the customer experience strategy. What would be next year's target?
It's actually that we're running along to it has an action plan with it, and that we're running along to that. We're making progress against the implementation. It's a 3-year strategy.
Okay, so there would be some targets that would be set out so that we can understand the extent to which progress is being made. Okay. Okay, so we're going to go to the next one, which is customer complaints.
So we categorise the customer complaint as these are complaints that are logged on our corporate complaint system, and we give ourselves 10 working days in which to provide a response to the customer. We aim to provide the complete response, but we will have sent out a holding letter within that 10-day period if we're unable to. It's more complicated than we can handle in 10 days. We also, on receipt of any complaint, send out an acknowledgement to the customer, whether that's online or via email, or we confirm it on a call if a complaint is logged. So our performance against this, we've exceeded the target for most of the year other than one quarter.
Right. Committee? Councillor Jones.
What do you, I understand what you do with the complaint in as much as you, with the 10 days, but if it's a complaint about the way we're running the system, what do we acknowledge that and try and change our system or whatever? It depends what the complaint is, but if you understand, if someone's complaining about, well, I can't get through because of, and there's a reason we should be getting through to the council, and how do we develop the work to change?
So we do have categories of complaint. It's not only the service, it's what is it? Is it a government policy? Is it lack of response from ourselves, for instance? So what we do is we look at the reasons for complaint, and each one is investigated. Where the strategy seeks to strengthen our approach is that trend management and highlighting larger issues. At the minute, the system we have doesn't allow us to do that. So it's not that it doesn't go on, but it is more ad hoc rather than systematically driven. So that's an improvement we want to make. In the contact centre particularly, it's quite easy to pick up trends because you hear it in the room. You hear when something is happening, or you've got a problem, say, on a particular round, or whatever it is, you do hear it more. But yes, we've developed that, so we're stronger on that.
Councillor Conquest.
Thank you. These numbers are talking about responding to customers when they complain. Do the customers get asked if they're satisfied with the resolution, and are those numbers recorded and in a KPI?
The numbers aren't recorded in a KPI, but our process allows for 2 stages of complaints. If the customer is unhappy with the first response, they can come back into us. It gets reviewed by a high level of manager, and then there is always the ombudsman appeal process if they're still unhappy with the actions, the response that the council has given them.
So have we had any referrals to the ombudsman?
I don't know the volume. We do get some occasionally, but it is rare. It is rare. I can find that out and share that with the committee afterwards.
Any other questions? Councillor Lee. Trying to help, yes. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what is missing from this is the detail of the kinds of complaints that we're receiving. It's good to hear there is a form of categorisation internally, but I think that's the kind of information that we would want to see on the sort of the underpinning element of these KPIs. So are most of them are about planning? Are most of them about waste? That's the kind of information, the granularity I think we're missing. I think Councillor Conquest is right to point out that satisfaction is not here, and I think that's something that we would need to see in the next round of this. And equally, I think seeing how many of those go to the second round and the local government ombudsman, I think will be important for this committee to understand, because I think at the moment we're only seeing, in that sense, 1/3 of the process. We're only seeing those initial complaints coming through and how quickly someone's responded. We're not seeing, was there a second round? Did the ombudsman become involved? Are people satisfied? I think there are elements of this that are missing, but overall it is good to see the overall KPI 307.
Yes, for future ones, I'll add that detail into the narrative for you, and just say we don't monitor satisfaction with our response, but that we would do the stage 1, stage 2 and ombudsman, so I will include that.
Thank you. Right, any other questions? Councillor Carr.
Just a very quick follow-up. Could you outline for me the rationale for not recording satisfaction with thoughts, with complaints from residents?
It's really about having the mechanism in place at the moment to do that. People can obviously feed back to us, but we don't have a mechanism in place to do that currently. It's not to say we can't, but currently we don't with our existing systems. One of the things that the strategy is looking at is how we get that customer feedback across our services. We used to have a product with smiley faces where you used to be able to say, did this meet the objective for you, etc. So we've lost that kind of customer satisfaction tracking in general, and including in complaint handling. So it's something the strategy is going to look at.
Thank you. Anything else from anyone? Nope. Okay. Katie, next one.
So one of the large pieces of work we did in this review year was implement a new structure to our council website. Our previous website had become quite dated. They are things that are subject to fashions in how information is laid out, the design of the page. Part of this has included rewriting all of our content for the web consumer. We do a lot of analytics on this in terms of what people search for, how effective that is. We have a 98.9% success rate on our website search engine. We're also looking at the parts of the site that get attention, the ones people look at. So we are always adjusting our running order of what you see on our home page. It's designed for our mobile phone. So we've done a lot of that work in terms of the setup of it. What will come into the customer strategy and digital moving forward is making improvements to our existing web forms. They are very powerful in what they do. They are not particularly user-friendly at the moment, so that is work that we are planning to do, and also see what other forms we can expose to the public so that we can offer as much as possible to people online, so they have the choice whether they wish to do it themselves or to engage with the council.
Any questions? Councillor Lee.
So websites and tech is really like the area, because I work in the industry. Is this an off-the-shelf product that we've purchased, or is it something that we've commissioned with somebody else to develop? And also within that, do we look at mobile users as a preferred base rather than desktop, because that's the trend that obviously most people use their phones to access the internet?
Yes, most people are coming to us through mobile. It is designed for mobile. The one exception to that is planning, where users still use desktop for reviewing the documents. In terms of the web content management itself, it is something that we have built with the provider, who is a local company. So it is developed for us. It's not an off-the-shelf product.
Anyone else? Councillor Lee.
Sorry, Chair. So as it is something that's been developed for us, have we, it may not be the forum, have we considered looking into AI within that, which has taken great strides in being able to help refine the searches that people are making so that it actually targets them to the right place?
We did implement an AI chatbot, I think in 2022 and 2023. It wasn't overly successful, so we withdrew that. I think the customer found it, the feedback we had from people and where we could see what people were doing, they didn't know whether to use the search on the bot or use the search on our site. But we absolutely are keeping a watching brief on AI and how we can utilise it to help our customer offer across the council. So yes, we are.
Brilliant, thank you. And how are we evolving our monitoring of users that are on the site? So there are tools out there that obviously we can track where they're looking, where they're scrolling, where they're reading. Do we do that as well as part?
Yes, we do that. We have a search engine tool that we use, and that provides reports. We also use another product which shows where people are going, the journey they took to get there, and also the accessibility ratings for the site. So all of that is monitored and acted upon.
And will that be followed up within the part of the digital programme? Any improvements within that, will it?
Yes.
Okay, anyone else? Councillor Julian Jones.
This is probably just more of a cry of pain than something finding a solution, but certainly for applications in our area where we have a very large number of comments and indeed revisions, we find some of those applications extremely difficult to navigate. And in a recent one, we've certainly found that documents that we wanted to refer back to have been cleaned off the site. So, as I say, this is not something I feel we may resolve, but it is a problem.
Are these member documents or planning documents?
This was planning. I mean, I can say which application if you like.
So that is a third-party portal that we go out to. So that is something that we are, as part of our web work and forms and how people access information, that is something we will be looking into to see if we can make improvements into the steps of getting there.
Yeah, I appreciate that, which is why I said I realised it probably wouldn't be resolved, though I am a little puzzled where those documents went that have disappeared.
Okay, Councillor Conquest.
Thank you. Like Councillor Lee, my background is in this area. Can I ask about resilience? The website was down for a few days a while ago. Normally, for a large organisation, they would have external monitoring in place to know when that happened, and there would be an automatic failover. Are there steps in place to make sure that the website doesn't go down again?
Yes, I mean, it is monitored in terms of the uptime of it. Sometimes we have other issues that also take out the website, which is what happened when we lost it for days. I will need to take that question away to fully answer it for you. I've only recently become involved in the IT side of things, and I wouldn't wish to give you the wrong information, so I'll find out about the failover.
Right, so you'll come back to the committee on it. Thank you. Any more? Councillor Lee.
Sorry, Chair, just to not follow up on Councillor Conquest. So you've done a lot of speaking about users in terms of external users, customers that visit the website. Then there's of course people that build the content and have to put stuff out there. are we doing work with internal staff users to make sure that it's easy, accessible, you're able to write the relevant content at the right place at the right time, and update services, that sort of stuff?
So we've centralised our web editing. So the web team work with key officers in the professional service areas. So they will know what they wish to convey. The web team will then write it in a way that's consumable for people. And bearing in mind all of the accessibility requirements, and then they check back that we haven't changed the intent of the officers' words, and that is how we found that quite successful as a way of approaching things. And the team are in regular contact with areas to say, are there any updates? And also people proactively come to us as well.
Anything else? No, I thought that was productive a segment of tonight's proceedings, because we were able to draw on the expertise of certain councillors on the committee, and thank you for your comprehensive responses. Okay, is that any more from you?
I've got one more.
Right.
Sorry. One more that's got a result, which is our EDI yearly targeted plan. So this talks about how we have our framework and the activities that have taken place in this review year to evidence the meeting of the framework requirements.
Anyone want to contribute on this? Nope. Okay, we can move on.
And then my final one is another one that will come out of the next resident survey.
Any observations on that? Nope. Okay, thank you very much, Katie. So we can now turn to our housing chief, Kate Randall. Evening, Kate. No.
Can talk a lot around what's behind this indicator and why the indicator is red, and what it might be suggesting, but it might just be easier to take questions directly from committee members.
Fine. So anyone got any questions for Kate? Nope. Okay, Kate. So we move on to your next KPI.
Well, thank you for swiftly moving through the red one, and then we can look at the green indicators. The next, should I take in terms of the next two? They're both bed and breakfast indicators. They're both statutory measures, so they're statutory requirements that we have to adhere to, and both are green because we didn't have any breaches last year.
Can you just put up the other one as well? Perhaps you're being helped by the low temperature in the room, actually.
The lateness of the hour, maybe.
Is there anything that can be done on that? Yeah, I think. Timing's everything, Kate. Right. Any questions for Councillor Lee?
Yeah, I think for me it's really, so just referring back to 121 versus 122. So you've got red versus green, both on B&B usage. What's the difference between it being on homeless households and a 6-week period? How do that translate?
The first indicator is literally a basic indicator on the number of households who've gone into bed and breakfast during the year, where families with children, and it could be for as little as one night. So it's just a total indicator during the year, whereas the 6-week one is the duration of time in bed and breakfast.
Any other contributions? Okay, next.
Next is placements in the private rented sector. That is one part of the jigsaw puzzle around how we minimise bed and breakfast, suggesting that this is not only green but is a commendable level of performance given the current market conditions. A lot of the placements, as you can see in the commentary, were Ukraine households, which reflect not just the amount of financial support able to support this initiative, but also the willingness of landlords particularly to respond to offer accommodation to Ukraine households.
Questions? Councillor Tony Jones.
Yeah, it's just on this private sector. This must probably not a problem. I think you know the answer before I even say it. It seems to me that we put people in the private sector with just high rents. How do we get them out of the private sector back into proper rented accommodation? Because it seems to me that people get stuck in the fact that because they're private rented, they're not on the housing list because they're adequately housed, but obviously the rents are so much higher and they struggle more. Sorry.
The purpose of this initiative really is around using the private rented sector to avoid bed and breakfast. So that's the sort of urgency around that. So in that context, the private rented sector, given that you've got as many private houses almost as social houses, is not a tenure that we can ignore. Often the private rented sector can be affordable. We put a lot of support into working with tenants with applicants through their household income to make sure that's sustainable, and we can use top-up funding using homeless prevention grant. If the property is not sustainable in the longer term, then people would be eligible to go onto the housing register, and we do in fact have quite a few numbers on the housing register who are in private rented sector and who are housed as a result of time sat on the waiting list through the housing register. So it's it would be nice if people could go into less secure or avoid less secure accommodation in their sort of homeless and housing route, but realistically the primacy is keeping people out of bed and breakfast.
Councillor Golding.
Thank you. I mean, first of all, I think well done. It really does show how hard the team are working. I have a couple of niggly questions though. Q1 is down as green, but you only had 14 placements, and if you divide 80 by 4, you get 20 placements a quarter to be hitting your target, which suggests, if you missed it by 6, suggests an amber to me, but I'd appreciate your thoughts. Also, there's something which I don't really understand. So on the bottom right, it says last year's performance on this measure saw 89 placements. So we've actually done a few less this year. But on the bottom left, it says it represents a 40% increase in outturn from the previous year.
Yes, so the target, it did exceed the target by that number, and it was always also a substantial improvement on the numbers that we achieved the year before. I can't remember what the target was the year before and whether that had changed and would reflect that. I can go back and check on that. And likewise, the RAG ratings as well. I'll look into that and come back to you with an answer.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bottom right, there is a view amongst officers that this target will need to be critically reviewed. What is your current thinking on the direction of travel of that, of the factors that you would consider in setting that target? I'd be interested to understand your thinking at this initial stage.
It's around having a look at realistically what placements we can make outside of the Ukraine work, because a lot of that did factor into performance this year. So where issues have gone with the Ukraine and what support we get through government and through Hampshire County Council for that. and also keeping that overview of rents compared to local housing allowance, and that whole I mean, this is such good performance. The team have done so well. It would be unfortunate if such a high level of performance is expected every year when realistically the market conditions are sort of facing otherwise. And that's not to say you set a target by, wanting it to be green, but we just need to be minded of how challenging those private rented levels are compared to, how we can place people with landlords that will take that level of hit on the rent. So it's a moving feast.
Yeah, and I think I understand that, but that's why it's useful to know what was achieved in the previous year, so that we can have we can compare that, even if conditions are more difficult, and therefore in the coming year you set a lower target. Yeah. Right. Any other points for Kate? No. Okay. Kate?
Rough sleeping. So this is green, and there is some context in the wording to it being green, given that the figure submitted and used as the measure was our annual rough sleep account, which was 4. But the wording sort of demonstrates how fluctuating numbers of people sleeping rough can be. So on one night you can have 4 people, on the next night you can have literally none. So this, I think the wording here is just to contextualise and to stress the wider sort of working that goes to stopping people going on the streets in the first place, and if they are found on the streets, moving them on in a way that's sustainable as well. So it's just some context to that. But overall, again, our rough sleeping figures are exceptional compared to the national trend, which is for rough sleeping to increase again. And it's something that survived the COVID the COVID situation. We preempted COVID, and then we got through COVID, and we're still sort of delivering after COVID.
Anyone? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I recall conversations that we had, some time ago, Kate, about my not necessarily thinking that using one day is necessarily the most effective way of keeping a track of this issue. I still think that we should think about another way of recording this, because I think if we're looking at one day and that one day ends up being the KPI we look at, I don't think we're actually looking at the problem as it stands. So I wonder whether we can be slightly more creative about how we measure this. Perhaps we look at multiple days. I just think we need to think about that. And then I think the second point is I'm grateful for the comparison to our sort of national and regional partners. I think perhaps what we need in the underpinning section here is that reference point. How are we doing in relation to similar districts as we've had for various planning measures?
Is that a recommendation that we all support in terms of how it's measured? I think so. I think if we go away and look at that, a basis of measurement.
We also do monthly snapshots that we submit to MHCLG, it is again now. So we can definitely provide that. And for members who I know might be interested, we do produce an detailed annual report on the housing and homelessness strategy, which rough sleeping would include all of the work that's done. So as soon as that's published, I'll send the link round to committee members who, if you've got trouble sleeping one evening, can have a deep dive into that.
Well, it won't be rough sleeping. Right. So, Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. Just within that recommendation, can we also, so homelessness is defined quite rigidly by government as to what that terminology is, but actually there are so many others that are homeless in that they don't have a home for themselves, and there's a lot of sofa surfing. There's one in my ward who is sleeping in the back of a converted minibus that just, I guess, are not taken within those statistics. Is there any way that we can kind of amend that as well to look at, yes, there are rough sleepers, but there are also people that are homeless?
We do that. We do that within the housing and homelessness strategy when we're taking a really broad evidence base, and also, as I say, looking at the figures for the annual review, so we can tell from our housing register how many people are claiming that they're sofa surfing, and all the statutory tests on homelessness, so that there's a wealth of contextual information, which unfortunately with these measures is just sort of stranded down to one or two widgets. So yeah, we absolutely can.
Thanks, Councillor Lee. That's an important contribution, I think, on a real problem. Councillor Julian Jones.
Just the nature of the people we're dealing with. I think a few years ago, I seem to remember there was quite a big programme, because really the fallout from our military exercises overseas, where there were a lot of ex-military who were here. Is that still the case, or are we now on a different group of younger people?
I think we are continuing to deal with a high-risk cohort for a number of reasons, not necessarily armed forces or younger, but due to a whole range of issues around mental health and substance misuse, and a series of sort of life events that may lead people onto the streets. We have constantly reviewed the army connection, and we don't find that to be a common feature throughout our rough sleeping cohort. But the amount of intelligence that we continue to harvest through the Social Inclusion Partnership keeps us abreast of all of that.
Councillor Lee.
Chair, I just wanted to, I guess it'd be worth noting that the council has just recently renewed its pledge to the Armed Forces Covenant as well. So I actually think the statistics on homeless veterans, I don't think nationally is, we're not, as a percentage of people, we're not actually higher than any other grouping of people. It just happens to be called out because of the fact that there's the armed forces connotation there.
Good. Okay. Anything else on this? No. Right. Thank you, Kate. Is there any more from you?
On to affordable housing delivery. This, which we anticipated through pipeline projections, is a year that we fell significantly below the annual target. It's 1 year in a number of years where it's helpful to look at a sort of delivery over a period of time rather than just 1 year. The next two forthcoming years, we are looking at certainly exceeding the target next year and potentially the year after as well. So not to sort of take away from the impact of not meeting that target this year will have on levels of housing need, and also to emphasise that, of course, the section, we're reliant on delivery through Section 106 agreements, albeit that work is being undertaken to accelerate affordable housing delivery within the current market, challenging market conditions. But there will always be a time lag with that, because it takes time to get schemes through processes.
Right, members? Julian Jones.
Are the statistics being affected? I think we're seeing in some of the developments, I'm not sure whether they would be classified as affordable, but houses that were for private occupation moving into the rental sector. Is that confusing the statistics at all?
I don't think so. You're referring to where RPs are buying up additional sort of levels of affordable of housing to convert to affordable on new.
As I say, it was converting to rent basically short-term rental. They were talking of 1 to 3 years of short-term rental, so it's a slightly different figure.
So this wouldn't include those because those would be private rented. So we're looking at social housing stock, which is affordable either for rent or shared ownership.
Yes, I think that may change under the new government, I guess. But in the past, we've seen the private housing on larger development sites coming first, and then the rental section and the affordable section coming late. And I think that probably reflects some of your predicted changes in the figures.
Okay, thank you. Any more? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we all share a view that seeing the affordable delivery number drop is very regrettable. I think that's something that we all agree on. I mean, it was not so many years ago that we were delivering the second highest number of affordable homes in the southeast, highest in Hampshire, and that's where we want to get back to, I think. And I think what is needed, I think, is a bit of an update from the administration on their latest position on accelerating affordable housing delivery. There were many promises made when that initial homelessness strategy, homelessness and housing strategy was passed, where there was a lot of conversation about an own council house building programme. We heard a lot of talk at the time about how that would be delivered and the various options for that. I think what this committee possibly needs, whether it's this committee or the Environment and Infrastructure Committee, is a clear update on the progress of that. We know that an exercise in land mapping took place. It would be useful to understand how much that cost and how far along that is, and whether that's led to any landowners expressing an interest in cooperation at all. And really whether we're starting to see any results in the pipeline as a result of that work. And then I think more broadly, what steps the administration is taking to push forward the affordable homes that are delivered as a result of market development. I think there's possibly, and it may not be for now, but a need for a broader update to members on how that whole work stream is progressing.
Residents Committee in November, there will be an update paper on that work that was launched about a year ago. So yeah, that will come.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up the point about the priority that it is for us, very conscious of what the former Cabinet member has said in terms of where we picked things up from, which is a reflection of the statistic that you see before you, and where we hope to drive it forward. And I share your aspiration, Councillor Carr, because it isn't acceptable, is it? 140 houses and the 14 socially rented that were delivered during that particular year was totally unacceptable. So I share your aspiration entirely. And I think from our perspective, it's also the fact that one size does not fit all. There will be sites that are within our control that we can bring forward in a process of procurement that will deliver socially rented housing. There is a whole range of market sites that are now looking through our RPs who have got access to grant funding, who will bring forward socially rented housing. And there are sites such as Manydown and others where we will see in the goodness of time significant volumes of affordable housing coming through that process that we're set in train. So I think there are a variety of routes to deliver what we seek, and what I'm hopeful of and what I'm confident of, given the work that the officers are doing, and I'd like to commend them, because it's not just one particular team of officers, it's a whole range of the team of officers across the council driving this forward as a priority, is that that figure next year will be significantly different. And that marks our commitment to actually changing the direction of that figure. I want it going up, and I want to keep it going consistently over the next few years and beyond, so that we can meet the needs of 5,500 people on a housing waiting register.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Anyone? Any other questions on this? Nope. Thank you, Kate.
Finally, an indicator on the work that we're doing around low-cost home ownership, which is a key plank within the housing and homelessness strategy, and giving the detail there of the events and initiatives that have been undertaken to continue to promote and support that objective, and they will continue to be driven forward in 24-25 as well.
So could we envisage that in order to be good next year, you would have to do more than you've done this year?
Harsh. Well, yeah, it's about making sure that those events happen, making sure that we obtain the same satisfaction levels, and we continue on the upward trajectory around numbers of people on our housing register, and we seek to complete the Own Home Loan Programme, which was launched. I think it's quite a unique initiative that amongst local authorities, so it is about continuance.
Yeah, so forgive me, I'm not suggesting that there isn't a lot of good work. I'm getting rather sort of over interested in how we measure performance, which is what we're here really to do tonight. Thank you. Right, any other points on this? Nope. Kate, thank you very much for your contribution. So committee, we're now Officer 6, so we've just achieved the halfway mark on this, and I think actually bear in mind also that the officers now before us have probably got more KPIs to speak to than the first 5. But anyway, we'll carry on, and I'm not suggesting we don't continue to scrutinise these things as thoroughly as possible, but just bear in mind the timing on things.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Committee. I've got 7 KPIs before you this evening. The first 3 that we're looking at are actually tied into our recycling figures. And what I would point out is that 2.01 is an amalgamation of 2.02, 2.03 and 2.04. So I think this KPI was amber. The reason for that is that we actually did have an increase in recycling. What you see before you here is a regular pattern of activity in Q4, because what we see is overall a large increase in tonnage of standard waste out of homes in our grey bins. That's the Christmas period. So the months that we're looking at here are the mop up from Christmas. So we do see a seasonal variation between Q3 figures and Q4 figures. So in respect to 2.02, if I approach these 3 together, and hopefully that will provide some better background for you all. The dry mixed recycling, so this is everything that isn't glass and that is part of the recycling service. What you'll see is there was actually an increase in that.
Sorry, Helen, can we just have that on the screen? Thanks.
Yeah, of course. So what you will see is a component part of 2.01 is actually dry mixed recycling, and you'll see that that was green. Again, we would expect to see that because we see increased waste in the Q4 period because of Christmas. What we will also see is an amber on KPI 2.03. And this, but what you will see here is an increase on Q4. So this is what we would expect to see around the Christmas period. People are buying bottles of wine or something nice for Christmas. So that is a standard seasonal figure that we see. And then finally at 2.04, because it does tie in, is our garden waste. And what you will see here is quite a substantive drop. That's completely normal. It's not a growing season, so we see less in our garden waste bins. But what we did do, which I thought you might be interested to know, is we did collect 3,762 real Christmas trees from the Bring Site delivery drop-off points for people with real trees. So that contributes to the Q4 figures. So did committee want to take any questions in respect to those numbers?
Yeah, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Just on 202, the increased percentage of household dry materials, you've put that the performance through the year was green, red, amber. So why is Q1 green at 14%, but Q2 is red at 14%? It's the same number. Considering the target was a figure greater than 16%, so Q3 is 17%, and that's considered amber, and Q4 is 16%, which is amber. I'm not sure I quite understand those discrepancies. And yet, overall, we've got 2 ambers, a red, and 1 green, but the performance is green.
I think something has gone wrong with the formatting there. I will get that checked and recirculated.
Thank you, Councillor Lee.
And just then on 204, again, we've got a figure of greater than 5% on garden waste. Performance through the year was green, 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 green. Q4 was 4.71. Should that be red or amber?
Yeah, I will get that checked.
Who's responsible for this?
So the strategy and performance team work with the heads of service on collating everything. But what we found was with the Q4 data, we'd had a particular format and style we were going for, but when we had a year end's worth of 79 measures, the slides became very busy and we reformatted the look, and I think some of the figure work hasn't copied over correctly, and it's an oversight, human error.
Yeah, but you can understand what
Oh,
we're highlighting here. That,
absolutely.
That it's suggesting that there's a green outcome, and that's clearly not supported by the figures. Councillor Golding.
Thank you. Can I ask, do we have figures for last year? Particularly, I'm interested in the garden waste one, because obviously our collection dates changed, so I'd be interested to know if there's been potentially any impact of that.
Yeah, can I bring that back to you?
Any further points on this? No. Helen, is there anything else from you, please?
Not on those. I have got 2 further KPIs for you. So, it might just be 1. No, it should be 2. So can I just tick? We've got 3. Yeah. So kilogram of household waste, I think I've covered sort of in the narrative. We do see an increase in Q4, and that is normal. It reflects the Christmas period. What I would say though is that last year at the same time at Q4, we actually had 48.5 kilogram per household. So although there is an increase in Q4 this year, it is less than we actually had last year. So I just thought I might point that out, because obviously that is good news, because that means that kilogram per household actually lowered in Q4 compared to last year.
Any questions, Councillor Lee?
I need a drink soon, I think. Just one that Councillor Carr pointed out earlier. We're on this. We're 16th of 16. Like, what are we doing? I mean, it looks like we're doing things right, but what are we doing wrong that's not putting us higher up?
So I think the candid approach to that is that most of the other local authorities that we're measured against actually have alternate weekly collections, and that is a predominant driver to behaviour change.
Councillor Tuck.
Thank you. I was going to ask a similar question about why we seem to be 100 kilograms per household per year adrift. Have you done any further analysis? There's obviously, I hear what you say about the alternate collections, but actually I'm sure there's probably a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah, so we've been doing a piece of work in the team in our flatter developments, where we've been going and actually putting labelling onto the recycling bins to try and improve the clarity around our messaging on recycling, and that's something that we obviously need to continue to do. So I think making sure that we've got regular communication with residents where we can share that information in, and that we keep that information updated on our website is really important. All of our waste and recycling officers work within geographic areas, and that really helps because it enables them to become very familiar with the population that they're working inside, their resident groups, but also really importantly, they get to know the crews and the actual teams that are providing service on the ground. And I think that that's something we need to continue to do, because spotting behaviour is also down to enabling our crews to identify those things and making sure that we're recording where there are anomalies in bins so that we can address that with particular residents. So that's a piece of work that will forever, I think, be ongoing.
Tony, did you have anything on us? No. Okay. Anything further? Councillor Golding.
Do you have a proposed figure target for next year? Is it going to be the same or less?
So we do have a figure. I can't remember it off the top of my head. Can I provide it to you? I wouldn't want to guess.
Yes, Councillor Jenkins.
Thank you. It might be naivety, but if we're doing so badly versus our neighbours, how are the KPIs set high enough for us to be receiving green or amber as opposed to red throughout?
So I think our KPIs are obviously modelled on the service that we currently provide. So we do look at what other authorities do, but we can't always compare like for like because our services are different. And sometimes some of the background data that you obtain nationally, people might measure different things because they recycle different things. So I think that's one of the parts that are coming through with the new Environment Act, is to try to standardise all of that so that we can actually start comparing like for like statistics across the waste sector.
Thank you. Yeah, a quick question. Certain areas of recycling different things, you just mentioned it just now, and that's what I don't understand is we don't do certain plastics or no plastics, but the neighbouring authority does, and I assume they recycle it through what's the organisation we're in, and I don't understand why we're not. You know, there's not a consistency. You know, you say fortnightly. I think that's to my mind is just an excuse, not your excuse, but an excuse for not hitting targets personally. But I think we're not consistent on what we can recycle, because you get people coming out of area living. So well, when I lived here, I could recycle my yogurt pot here, but here we don't. I don't know whether you've got an answer for us or what. I doubt very much, but I thought I'd just mention it.
No, that's a really good question, and it's completely true. So what we actually put into our recycling bin is determined by what our disposal authority is able to extract from the waste. So all of the infrastructure in Hampshire dictates what it is that we can put into our recycling bin. So what we recycle in Hampshire may not be the same as what we recycle in Surrey. So we can't collect things that our disposal authority can't process. So that's one of the reasons why the government came out with simpler recycling and is putting that through so that everybody unifies that approach.
Just come back, and I'm not drilling you on this one, but my daughter lives in a different area, which it comes under, I can't remember what they call them, handover. I don't know Test Valley. Now they're Hampshire, but they're recycling different things, plastics, and we're saying we're not. And I really don't understand either. We can't sell plastics, so therefore we don't recycle it. I understand that, but the neighbouring authority does, and their waste their recycling is higher, and I'll leave it.
So as a resident of Test Valley, they also don't take curbside collection for glass. So again, different authorities operate in different ways according to how they want to collect their recycling. I'd be happy to pick up with you in greater detail around the plastics, if that would help. Yeah, rather than me guess all of Test Valley, because I can only talk as a resident.
Okay, anything else? Councillor Lee.
This is more of a generic point aimed at the council leader, and it's more because I mentioned about the SIPFA. If we look through this whole report, we are consistently in the bottom of some SIPFA table of our nearest partners, apart from on one metric. So what are you going to be doing? What is the council leader going to be doing to make sure that we aren't 16 of 16, 15 of 16? I think the highest we get is 10 of 16, other than the one where we are second, and that's in council tax payments. It just seems quite a trend, a worrying trend.
No, I'd agree with you, Alex. Councillor Lee, I think from the point of view of inheriting a situation where our recycling rate is as low as it is, where we're 260 odd out of 300 authorities, where we are the only authority to collect the way we do in what's left of Hampshire. Every other place has gone differently, have changed their systems, where we're going to see the introduction of new services. There is lots that we can do to change that, an awful lot. We need to work together to achieve that end. We have all agreed a climate change and ecological emergency. So that's a very clear drive of it as a council. We agreed that unanimously. We take that very seriously. We take those responsibilities very seriously. There are things that we can do as an authority to change. We need to help residents to help us, to help themselves change in that context. So there's a massive education campaign that needs to be done where we can encourage people to recycle everything they can recycle. There is a work to be done with the county council to see how they can change what plastics they take and how that service, the disposal element, changes. And I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle, because we do want Tetra Paks, pots, yogurt pots, and everything to be recycled. It's critical. And that's coming. That is coming as part of the work that's being done. I think it is absolutely right that we bring forward as soon as we possibly can a weekly food waste collection, because that is not only mandated by the Environment Act, so we have to do it, but it's right that we do it, and we do it well. And our officer team are doing a tremendous amount of work to bring that forward, because it is mandatory. We have to do it. It isn't something as a matter of choice, but we choose to do it earlier if we agree with the direction of travel that we hope to set at Cabinet next week. And I don't want to preempt that decision, because that is a decision that Cabinet will need to take with all the facts in front of it. But those facts point you to a particular direction, which doesn't mean that residents lose a weekly service. It means they get a change in how we do things. And we take them with us so that we take out of their grey bin the things that we want to dispose differently. So, for example, food waste goes to anaerobic digesters that would produce biogas, that produce fertiliser, and it's not just incineration. That we enable the county and work with the county to take the plastics out of the bin that we want. And if we do it well, and if we do it the way we want to do it, you could see what's left, the residual of a grey bin, coming down to less than 30% of what's in it currently. That would be a dramatic shift. And it's also about changing behaviour, so people, in a sense, reduce consumption and change consumption in a way that helps people to see that food waste and plastic waste is something they can do something about. The other piece of the puzzle, there's a large part of the Environment Act will be where residents can have a relationship with their supermarket or shops in a way that plastics and other recyclables can go back to them. And there's a whole market being developed there. That's really good, a local opportunity to do that. So I think there is a whole range of things we can do. And we can do this together, and we can work cooperatively and constructively because we all care about the environment and our climate change abilities, or we could choose to do something very differently from a political angle if we chose to do so. I hope that we are sensible and that we do the right thing for our residents, which is to keep a really good standard of service, which this council has been proud of for many years, but we do the right thing for climate change and the environment. So I'm with you 100%. I think there's a lot we can do, and we will consider doing that, but I don't want to preempt the decision of Cabinet next week and all of the work that then flows out of that, were we to make that decision.
Thanks, Joe. Being mindful of time. It always frustrates me the level of recycling, not just in Basingstoke. It's the UK. I've served in Germany where you were able to take your bottles back to the shop, and you're essentially paying for the bottle at the point of sale, and then you take it back and you get money off your next. It really frustrates me, but. With the food waste, doesn't it? Do we envisage a change of behaviour that's going to result in a reduction in the tonnage of waste, but also, that whole point around recycling and what we can and can't. Sometimes I'm loath to. We need to recycle, but it's also being very conscious that we're not sending so much of it abroad, which is not the solution to the problem, right? It just adds to a global problem more than anything.
I think you're quite right, and I think it's important to bear in mind that the ability to take something back to the supermarket in a way that you may get something off the next is coming. That will come in the direction that the Environment Act has set. It will also change, I think, in terms of the targets that were set, because we will be expected to collect less tonnage. There'll be a target around that, and we have to achieve that, otherwise we will be penalised. So there's a significant amount of work to be done in this area that will reflect in these KPIs in the future, and we have to capture that. So I really do think this is a very important piece of work for us to do as a council, and we have a choice, as I say. We can play politics with it, or we can sit around the table and talk like adults about how we achieve a really good standard of service that meets our climate and ecological emergency declarations, achieves really good value for money for residents, and delivers a service they can be proud of that achieves all of that. So I really do hear with you. I'm looking forward to working with you on it.
Right. Thank you. Anyone got anything else to? No, Helen, does that finish? One more. Okay, good.
Yeah, one more. Sorry, guys. So you will notice that there is a not applicable status on resident satisfaction. I just wanted to give you some feedback on that. We used to conduct telephone satisfaction surveys with residents, and we actually found we were getting lower and lower and lower and lower rates of returns, because I just think people have moved on and generally use mobile phones rather than standard landlines. So we just wanted you to know that the team are actually doing a piece of work with our contractor to look at best practice, to look at what other councils are doing. As a result of that, we are likely to move to an online survey, but actually it would allow us to run a survey on a quarterly basis. So we want to try that, and we're trying that in September. So we're hoping that that will generate a lot of enthusiasm and get a lot of feedback from our customers. So I just wanted to let you know that we are going to be doing a survey, but that's the reason why there's a not applicable in here at the minute. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Any points on that? Obviously, it's a very important service that the council provides. I'm glad that you are going to be seeking to measure resident satisfaction or otherwise with the service. Okay, so the earlier slides, we're going to get those re-provided with accurate data on them, and we can perhaps look at that at the next meeting, please, so that we don't lose track of that. Committee, we're halfway through, I think, the number of slides. We can go till 9:30 and then take a decision on whether how much further beyond that if we're happy to go beyond 9:30. And perhaps that's what we should do, is look at it at 9:30. But could we sort of bear in mind that we may need, we may reach a point where we may have to hold a second meeting to consider this. But let's see how. Can I suggest let's see how we are at 9:30, and then take a decision at that point. But can I suggest that we might have a 5-minute comfort break now, if everyone's happy to do that? Okay. Good. Come on, Tony. So we're waiting for Councillor Jenkins. So, committee members, we're near 9:30, and under the rules we have to make a decision whether we wish to carry on beyond that, and perhaps for how long. It seems unlikely, though, that we're going to get through all the agenda, so I think we can either decide that we'll go for a period of time and see how far we get, and then we may have to have a second meeting. Unless anyone's got any other suggestions for how we approach this. Clearly, we are facing tonight a report that covers pretty much every aspect of the council's activities. So it's no wonder that we are, because we're doing the job thoroughly as we should be, and so we want to make sure we give ourselves enough time to ask all the questions we have got to ask, and there have been plenty of very good questions which I think, listening to the leader, they will take away and we'll give them things to think about. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm conscious that we have just had a 5-minute break, but I worry that we will just start not scrutinising it as effectively as we've done for the last 3 hours, and really I guess I'm suggesting we schedule another follow-up and we look at those other areas at that point, because we've had a lot of good questions and a good set of debate about it, and whether we just
we have another meeting in the diary for September the 24th, but the trouble with that is that by that time we've got the Q1 figures through, so there's a collision going on there, so that doesn't work. So I think I agree with the point you're making that would be fresher if we looked at this and adjourn this meeting and had a separate meeting. I'm sorry to sort of bring officers in twice, but that's democracy for you. So what could I Ellie, look, you want to sort of say something, so
I was just going to make the point that obviously we're at the end of July now, and normally we don't have any committee meetings in August that aren't DC regulatory committees.
is there any reason why we couldn't? Not normally. Right. So, looks as though we've got to crack on, haven't we, then, on that basis? Councillor Tony Jones.
Well, the idea of having a 9:30 cut-off is for a reason, and you know, I don't mind going on till 10 o'clock, but anything past there, I think it's unreasonable. I've been here too long. I've seen people rush through papers just to get home. And even if we have to have another meeting in August, some of us will be away. I won't be, but some of us will be away. That's the way it is, I'm afraid. We'll have to rely on other members of the committee to ask the questions.
The voice of experience. Thank you very much. Councillor Tuck.
Chair, I'm in favour of adjourning and having a second or follow-on meeting, but I did wonder if anyone had any quick questions on the pink papers that would allow officers who've already done their bit, that then they do not have to return for the second meeting. That might be more efficient and helpful if they were quick ones.
Councillor Golding.
I think that's quite a good idea, actually. Like, I'd be quite happy to go until 10 to discuss pink papers for areas that we've already done, because it feels like we could complete that work. I think the danger of carrying on just looking as we've been doing is that we're never going to finish it, so we're going to need another meeting anyway. Having a quick dip into the pink papers for the ones we've looked at, I would second that suggestion.
Councillor Jenkins.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with that. I think that's a good idea to get as much resolved as possible tonight. I don't know about anyone else, but I'm definitely flagging.
Councillor Conquet.
I completely agree. I think finishing off the pink papers is a good place to finish. Can I also ask for the next meeting that we get clarification on the scope of this meeting and where KPIs might be covered by other committees that have more expertise in that area? Is there a limit to what we should be asking?
Yeah, I'm not sure I quite understand the thrust of that.
Well, it seems to me that a lot of the material here is covered by the committees. So, I don't know. This is my first time on the committee.
Yeah,
so
no, but this is a report that's an annual report produced by the council, and therefore it needs to be scrutinised, and it has to. The fact that it covers a huge range of material is a problem, but it still needs to be scrutinised, and that's what we're doing tonight, I think. Councillor Lee.
I agree with the comments that you've just made, but also the remit, I guess, prior to the change of the model was that this was the scrutiny function, whereas now we've got the three committees that are all scrutiny, and whether that could mean that these KPIs are actually split between the relevant scrutiny committees, so that actually all that happens is that we get, ones that are relevant to the services that we're looking into, and the same for resident services and the others. They would have their KPIs that they've been dealing with throughout the year.
That's a fair point, and that's something that could be looked at, I think, actually. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. If I can be helpful here at all. That's a conversation, I think, between you as the three chairs of the three overviews, quite rightly, to have that conversation. I'm conscious there are officers who have attended this evening who have not presented their KPIs. They've been here all evening, and I'd like to thank them for that, because they've given up their evening for that purpose, to be here for you as members. And those who are going to stay, if you're going to do the pink papers, can we be specific as to who you want to stay in order to answer those questions on the pink papers? Let's be fair to the officers if we can.
Thank you for that, and absolutely right. We have tried to move through this as efficiently as possible, but it's a huge agenda item, and we've obviously it's provoked a lot of searching questions, which is what we're here for. But yes, thank you, officers, for your attendance this evening. And I think we're agreed then that we're going to move to the confidential papers. And could I ask committee members if they're able to identify those officers that they're going to wish to address? You can have a few minutes to think that through. Councillor Lee.
I apologise, Sarah Longthorpe. Sorry. Keep you here for a bit longer.
Is there anything we can do? How many days have we got left this week?
It's not on.
No, that's okay. So we'll just have to look at early September one.
Unless you did decide to move it to
No, we'll do early September. Yeah. Councillor Carr.
Apologies. I think from my perspective, it's just local plan.
So that's 2 officers then, is it? Okay.
Yes, Chair, but although it has just been pointed out that Many Down is only on pinks, it's not on the KPIs. So if you had any on Many Down, you would have to. Sorry.
No, we might be picking up at the next meeting. What, the next meeting of this committee? No. No, because it's Many Down is only under pink. So if you want to ask questions of Andrew Reynolds, you've got tonight to do it. Otherwise, he's a free man.
In which case, apologies, could we have Andrew as well, please?
Yeah, right, okay. That's fine. Good. So that's 3 officers, and thank you for the other officers for all your contributions this evening, and those who haven't contributed. Just on the point about another meeting, because we're going to have another meeting. Convention has it that only urgent meetings should take place in August, and therefore what I think we would need to look at is as beginning of September for the meeting to do part 2 of this, if that works for everyone. And as it happens, we've got no agenda item for September the 24th, so you're not going to have to appear for this committee on 2 occasions in September. Is that a deal? Okay, fine, good. Okay, good. Now I have to say a few things, don't I, to take us out of a public meeting into a confidential meeting. So I'll do that if I may. So I've got to ask the Democratic Services Office to turn the webcast. No. Sorry, I'm ahead of myself. So, are we agreed that that the meeting is now to become confidential by passing the following motion? That pursuant to Section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting on the ground that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing it, and therefore that exempt information is likely, to be disclosed as defined in the appropriate paragraphs 3 of Schedule 12A of the Act. This means that in order to discuss the papers, the webcast is going to be turned off, but we will be back with you once the discussion is over. So if I could ask Ellie now to remove any members of the press or public, although that doesn't apply, and ask you to switch off the webcast, please.